So Tesla is all over the news lately. This is driving large swings in price. We've seen a huge run up right now. Is there easy money to be made here? How can you profit off this? I think I've got some data that you'll find pretty interesting.
You have to pay attention to your money.
So to understand what's going on, you have to realize that Tesla is now being added to the index. This happens typically when a very large company reaches profitability and the people that run the index feel that it's now a representative stock of the broader market. And some people will tell you this is long overdue. Tesla has been a primary driver of the market for a long time now. So they first attempted to do this, or they took a look at doing it in September, and they actually refused Tesla entry into the index. And this surprised a lot of people. I think a lot of folks assumed that as soon as they hit that profitability number, given their size and the fact that they're a market mover anyway, that it was absolutely going to happen. But it didn't. And I think there was an enormous amount of disappointment in that move, and it shook out a lot of people that were holding Tesla at the time. And there was a significant drop in price. Quickly recovered though, and Tesla began to climb again after that news. Now in early November they took a look at it again, and this time they pulled the trigger and said yes, and immediately the stock shot up, I think about 22% in 2 days. So the complete opposite reaction. There was a lot of interest in this, and it drove a lot of buyers. And then the most recent news is that on November 30th, they made a decision to move Tesla into the index all at once. And this was kind of a contentious thing. They weren't sure if this was wise because the sheer amount of volume that that's going to drive on the day that it's added is completely unprecedented. The market's never seen a move this big, and a lot of people were concerned that it's going to drive some really unpredictable effects. However, they talked to a lot of people and finally arrived at the consensus that, yep, rip the Band-Aid off and let's go in all at once on December 21st. So the excitement only continued after that news. Once that uncertainty was removed, the price continued to climb, and I think we're up now some 39–40% from the initial news. That's an amazing run. So I think in these highly volatile growth stocks that are driven more by sentiment than anything else, I think it's really helpful to take a look at sentiment. And if we see here, you can see exactly what happened to the price. Like I said, in September, on August 31st, the price peaked. The decision was made not to include it, and then we see this drop right here. So that shook out a lot of folks. It didn't really change sentiment overall, though, in terms of the analysts that followed the stock and what was going on. If you look at the short interest here, it's been steadily declining ever since May. It's been dropping, and it still has not gone up. Interestingly, this is actually an indicator that it might be wise to short the stock when short interest is comparatively that low. Analysts are still liking the stock. Sentiment here reached a small negative peak in July, and it's only been declining since then. There's a lot of bullish analysts out there that are saying to buy this thing, almost because it's unavoidable. And I think you can see that reflected in the price target here. Currently, the price target is just under $400 for a stock that's trading at $600. That's pretty unusual. I think normally you see the analysts simply chase a moving price like this, but I think they see the speculation that's driving this movement, and so I think there's some reluctance to follow that. In terms of estimates, though, I think that analysts are buying into the growth story. You can see them here, raising those sales estimates, trying to keep pace with the growth that Tesla has seen, and it has been a good growth story, and I think it will continue to be. Fundamentally, they are able to deliver, for the most part, on the growth that's driving these numbers. Sure, there's disappointments along the way, but by and large, the growth is being delivered. And finally, on the sentiment chart, I'd like to include this indicator of institutional ownership. And kind of surprisingly, there was a dip in institutional ownership when it was reported in November until now. There was a drop here of about 6%. If we zoom out though on the 5-year chart and take a look at that in context, it's not that big a deal. There's been a bit of a decline here overall, just as the share volume itself has changed that number. So I don't think it's all that unusual. It's just part of this long-term trend in that change of institutional ownership. And certainly when it's included in the index, that picture is going to be thrown out the window, and we'll actually start a new chapter in terms of who owns Tesla and why. So if we take a look at the technical chart, we can see a better view of that price action. Again, there's that massive drop that happened in September. That must have been painful for a lot of people. Then there was an immediate reconsolidation after that, and we see a bit of a trading range here coming into the decision in November, and then we see this big hop up in price. And I think it's worth noting here that we're at a fairly well-defined level of resistance. I think 600 is psychologically important to people. But I think this is also the number that the broad market is calling as the point of resistance, and I think that the smart money doesn't want to go beyond this number until the dust settles after index inclusion. So whether you agree with that number or not, what's happening here is the speculators are coming up to that number, and anything above it is driving profit taking, because I think the large holders are seeing that the number really can't go beyond that, and they're absolutely willing to take profits if it does. So this is all about the market trying to find the new base price after inclusion in the index, and they seem to be relatively convinced that that number is 600. I think this is actually the peak of the current speculation based on index inclusion. So what's going to happen on December 21st? That's the big news. I think a lot of the current price action is already on the screen. I think it is what it is, and I think now we need to think about the 21st and what's going to happen in the immediate term after that date, and then beyond. What's the stock going to do? So Tesla is really unique. They don't have a lot of peers. I think, though, that there are a few lessons we can take from Facebook. Facebook was added to the index back in 2013, and they saw a similar run-up in price, and then they saw a little bit of a drop after that. So if we take a look here at the picture, you can see that Facebook hit their peak at about $58 when they were added to the index back in December of 2013. And in about the 6-day period right after that, they saw a 9% pullback. It doesn't look big on this chart, but certainly in that 6-day period, it shocked a lot of people. They only saw good things go forward for Facebook, and that pullback was a bit of a surprise as it shook out some of these folks that were only holding Facebook speculatively based on what they thought would happen with index inclusion. And I think this is very typical because I think folks tend to overestimate what's going to happen on big news events like this. In fact, there's a little bit of research on this. I have a paper here from Winton Research back in 2014, and they studied this effect. They looked at what happened when a stock experienced this dramatic run-up or this front-running of the index, and what happened in the days afterwards. So they have an interesting chart down here on the price impact. So you can see here that there's a very typical run-up in price. The stock tends to reach this peak that's hit in the days immediately coming up to index inclusion, and then there's this trailing off afterwards. So they've categorized the price rise in two different ranges. They've identified this permanent impact. So some of this rise in price tends to stay. It's permanent, and the stock tends not to go below that permanent price change. But there is a portion of it that tends to revert. And so what they're saying here is that some of that price run-up will fall off in the days immediately after the stock is added to the index. And so this, I think, does present a little bit of a trading opportunity. You can see here that they've actually measured these impacts. And so they've measured the average permanent impact at 5.3 and the average temporary impact at 1.6. So this is their average projected drop for a typical stock when it's added to the index. And they claim here that this is a fairly consistent and predictable change in the stock price. Now, I'm pretty sure Tesla has hit peak impact at $600. I think that's that key resistance point. And I think that if this particular effect applies to Tesla, we're going to see a pullback. Now, Tesla's a lot more volatile than the average stock used in this research paper. So I think the overall size of that movement is likely to be bigger. Tesla, like I said, experienced about a 40% run-up prior to this peak at 600. And so if we compare that price movement to the average price movement that's seen here, I've already done the math, and it's about 9% in terms of what this effect would predict for a pullback in Tesla after December 21st. And coincidentally, that's about the drop we saw in Facebook back in December of 2013. They had about a 9% pullback. So just based on this data, I'm thinking that there's probably going to be a similar pullback in Tesla on December 22nd. Based on that, I would predict a new baseline price of about $540 go forward. After that, who knows? So all that said, would I do this trade? Quick answer is no. I don't like the risk that comes with shorting stocks, especially with something like Tesla. I think that there could be a large amount of unpredictable upside from who knows what. And so that unlimited risk in a short position is not something that I'm particularly interested in. Now, that said, if you are a buyer of Tesla anyway and you're looking for a pullback, I think this could be an enormous gift that gets handed to you in the few days after December 21st. And if that's the case, I would say you should absolutely look for it and take advantage of getting into Tesla at that time. So anyway, that's it, guys. That's all I have to say. Hope it helps you understand the current price action in Tesla and some of the mechanics around this index inclusion stuff. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'm really looking to grow the channel, and that's a huge help. Please consider subscribing, ring the bell, and I'll see you on the next one.